The courtroom buzzed with its familiar energy of expectation. Attorneys shuffling documents, onlookers murmuring in low voices, and the distant echo of a gavel from another hearing room. Judge Eleanor Hayes occupied her position at the bench, her expression composed and authoritative. It seemed like just another ordinary day, another routine case, or so she initially believed. The bailiff announced the proceedings. The state of Louisiana versus James Anderson. Eleanor adjusted herself slightly, her palms resting against the smooth oak surface before her. She reviewed the documents spread out in front of her. Assault, theft, resisting arrest. A recognizable pang of sadness settled within her, witnessing yet another troubled individual caught up in the legal machinery. Her assumption changed completely when the accused was escorted into the room. The man who stood before her, restrained with handcuffs and leg irons, was no stranger to her. This was James Anderson. Her James. Her breathing became constricted as waves of recollections came flooding back. Those summer days spent competing on bicycles along the dirt roads of Hammond, Louisiana. The evening conversations beneath the magnolia in her family's yard. The childhood promises they'd exchanged to always support one another, no matter the circumstances. Yet the individual before her bore little resemblance to the youth she once knew. His posture was defeated, his features marked by years of struggle, though his eyes, those profound, expressive eyes, remained unmistakably the same. Eleanor's hold on her gavel weakened for the first time in her judicial career. She found herself pausing. The courtroom felt smaller, the boundaries closing in as she struggled to comprehend this impossibility. James glanced upward, his face showing both surprise and defeat. A spark of recognition appeared in his gaze, but he quickly averted his eyes, lowering his head somewhat. The courtroom remained in expectant silence. Eleanor compelled herself to proceed. "Mr. Anderson, you face charges of assault and theft. What is your plea?" James's voice emerged hoarse, nearly unrecognizable. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her pulse quickened. She felt the urge to halt everything, to demand explanations. What circumstances had led him here? How had their lives taken such different directions? However, her judicial responsibilities required maintaining composure. "Proceed," she announced, her voice more controlled than her emotions. As the prosecution launched into their opening remarks, Eleanor's thoughts were in turmoil. This wasn't simply another case. This was James. And somehow, she needed to find a way to keep her history separate from her present duties before it became too late. The courtroom seemed to fade, as Eleanor's consciousness drifted to an era long before her judicial robes and the authority of her position. She and James had been raised on different sides of Hammond, Louisiana, separated not by physical distance, but by the implicit boundaries of their divided community. Her family's residence was a humble single-story dwelling with white fencing, while James's household occupied a worn structure at the terminus of an unpaved lane surrounded by farmland. Their friendship had been extraordinary. She recalled their first meeting, a chance encounter beside a stream where she had wandered beyond her own property boundaries. James had been angling, his fishing line caught among the marsh plants. She had volunteered assistance, and that simple act had blossomed into years of clandestine explorations and mutual aspirations. "Eleanor," he had once remarked, reclining on the grass beside her beneath the night sky, "do you ever consider departing from this place? Like truly escaping? Traveling somewhere people wouldn't regard us strangely just for spending time together?" She had chuckled then, dismissing the notion, but James had been serious. Even as a youth, he perceived the world as it truly was, a place that didn't always accommodate individuals like himself. Their connection strengthened despite the gossip, the suspicious looks, and the direct disapproval from both communities. Yet the tension was perpetually present, like a burden neither could escape. Then one day, everything concluded. It occurred during the summer preceding their high school years, when Eleanor's father discovered them together on the front porch. His voice had been frigid, cutting with authority. "Eleanor, come inside immediately." She had wavered, looking toward James, who remained motionless. "Go ahead," he had said softly, his voice colored with acceptance. "I'll see you later." But they never encountered each other again, not truly. Her father prohibited her from approaching James, and shortly thereafter, James's family relocated. Eleanor immersed herself in academics, her goals propelling her far beyond Hammond's boundaries. She attended law school, pursuing ideals of justice and equity, yet she never forgot the boy who had shown her the meaning of bravery. Now, presiding from the bench, she pondered what had become of James after she had entered that house and shut the door on their friendship. His criminal history revealed a pattern of arrests for minor violations, petty larceny, vagrancy, nothing suggesting violent tendencies. However, how much of someone's existence could be understood from a few entries on a police record? The prosecutor's voice brought her attention back to the current moment. He was detailing the alleged offense. James stood accused of attacking a store employee during a robbery at a convenience establishment in Baton Rouge. The employee had sustained minor harm, and the cash drawer had been emptied. James was apprehended several blocks away, allegedly still carrying the stolen money. Eleanor observed James as the prosecutor continued speaking. His stance was slumped, his hands folded before him, yet his expression remained unreadable. Had he actually committed this crime, or was there more to the situation than the prosecution's narrative suggested? The court recessed for lunch, providing Eleanor an opportunity to collect her thoughts. Upon returning to her office, her aide, Margaret, approached with a tentative demeanor. "Judge Hayes, are you feeling well? You appeared somewhat distracted," Margaret inquired. Eleanor hesitated. Should she confide in Margaret? Would it be inappropriate to acknowledge her familiarity with the defendant? Instead, she declined with a headshake. "I'm fine, just dealing with many concerns." But she wasn't fine. How could she be when the history she had buried so deeply was seated mere feet away, awaiting her judgment? The courtroom was crowded when proceedings resumed. Journalists took notes, the clerk organized documents, and the prosecutor, a stern-featured man named Richard Powell, was prepared to present his argument. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Powell commenced, his voice resolute. "This case concerns violence. It involves a man who entered a convenience store and, without provocation, attacked an innocent employee before stealing the register's contents. The evidence will demonstrate that James Anderson is guilty of this offense." Eleanor felt tension building in her stomach. The prosecutor's approach was methodical, impersonal, as though James were merely an entry on a case list. She glanced toward James, whose attention remained focused on the table in front of him. The defense counsel, Lisa Porter, rose to deliver her opening statement. She was youthful but self-assured, with a voice that resonated throughout the room. "The prosecution wants you to believe this case is simple, but it isn't. My client, James Anderson, has proclaimed his innocence from the beginning. We will demonstrate that there is more to this situation, and that assumptions made during the arrest do not withstand examination." The first witness was summoned, a store employee who had been working during the incident. He described observing a man matching James's appearance enter the establishment, argue with the cashier, then leap across the counter. His account was thorough, yet something seemed rehearsed about it. Lisa's cross-examination was precise. "Mr. Chambers, you testified that the man who attacked the clerk wore a red sweatshirt. Is that accurate?" "Yes," the witness responded. "Did you clearly see his face?" "Not really. It was dim, and he had the hood raised." Lisa nodded, moving slightly. "So you're stating you couldn't positively identify the person who committed the assault?" "Well, no, but—" "No additional questions," Lisa interrupted. Eleanor noticed James adjust slightly in his chair, his posture straightening as though the exchange had provided him some hope. The subsequent evidence was surveillance footage from the store. The recording was unclear and dimly lit, showing a hooded figure entering the establishment. The prosecution contended that the person in the video was James, but the poor quality made identifying features nearly impossible. As the footage played, Eleanor examined it carefully. Could this truly be James? The figure moved rapidly, reaching toward the counter before vanishing from view. The recording ended abruptly, creating an unsettling void in the story. James's defense centered on an alibi. He maintained he had been walking home from a friend's residence during the robbery. The friend, however, refused to testify, citing concerns about community retaliation. Lisa argued that the absence of a cooperative witness didn't invalidate James's innocence, but the jury's faces suggested doubt. As the trial progressed, Eleanor felt the burden of her position intensifying. She was supposed to remain neutral, a symbol of impartiality. Yet how could she when every instant reminded her of their childhood? The boy who had once been her dearest friend was now a man fighting for his liberty, and she was responsible for determining his destiny. When court adjourned for the day, Eleanor remained at the bench, her fingers running along the gavel's edges. She wanted to speak with James, to ask him directly what had occurred, but she knew it was impossible. Any contact beyond the courtroom would compromise the case and her career. As she watched James being led away in restraints, Eleanor's determination faltered. She had always trusted the justice system, believing in its capacity to uncover truth. But for the first time, she questioned whether truth was something it could ever truly comprehend. The courtroom hummed with quiet conversations as the trial reached a crucial juncture. It was the defense's opportunity to present their argument, and Lisa Porter called her primary witness, Officer Daniel Harris, the arresting officer. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her eyes focusing intently. This was where weaknesses, if they existed, might become apparent. Officer Harris, a stocky man with a rough manner, took the witness stand. Lisa approached him with calculated composure. "Officer Harris," she began, "you were the one who detained my client, correct?" "That's correct," he replied curtly. "You stated in your report that Mr. Anderson was walking 2 blocks from the robbery scene when you apprehended him. Is that accurate?" "Yes." "And what made you believe he was the suspect?" Harris shifted uncomfortably. He fit the description. A black male, mid-40s, wearing dark clothes. Lisa's eyebrows rose slightly. Dark clothes. But the suspect in the video was described as wearing a red sweatshirt. "Did you find a red sweatshirt when you searched Mr. Anderson?" Harris paused. "No, but he could have gotten rid of it." Lisa stepped closer. "Could have. Did you or any officer search the area for this alleged sweatshirt?" Harris's expression hardened. "Number, we didn't have the opportunity. He was arrested quickly." Lisa continued pressing. "So to clarify, you arrested my client based on a general description without physical evidence connecting him to the scene?" The officer's silence was more telling than words. Eleanor looked toward the jury. Several members appeared uncertain. Lisa wasn't finished. "Officer Harris, do you remember if Mr. Anderson said anything during his arrest?" He objected, claimed he was innocent. "And did you investigate his claim, or did you assume guilt based solely on his appearance?" Harris's face flushed. "I followed proper procedure." "Procedure," Lisa echoed, her voice filled with skepticism. "No further questions, Your Honor." The courtroom stirred as Harris left the stand, his credibility clearly damaged. Eleanor's heart raced. This had become more than just a trial. It was a moment of reckoning, not only for James, but for a system that seemed too quick to condemn him. The defense's next strategy was surprising. Lisa presented an expert witness, a forensic specialist who had analyzed the surveillance footage. The analyst explained that based on the height and build of the individual in the video, there was no conclusive way to confirm it was James. Additionally, the footage's timestamp had been modified, raising questions about its authenticity. The prosecutor tried to dismiss the testimony as speculation, but the jury seemed troubled. A sense of uncertainty entered the room, and Eleanor could feel its significance as the day concluded. James was offered the chance to testify in his own defense. Lisa had cautioned him about the risks, but James insisted. He stood, chains softly clinking as he approached the witness stand. His voice, though quiet, carried genuine sincerity. "I've made errors in my life," James began, speaking directly to the jury. "I've made poor choices, trusted the wrong individuals, but I didn't do this. That evening, I was walking home, keeping to myself, when the police stopped me. They didn't ask questions. They simply decided I matched their expectations." His voice wavered slightly as he continued. "I've been struggling my entire life, fighting to be seen as more than what people assume about me. But this, I'm exhausted. I just want the truth to be important." Eleanor's throat constricted as James returned to his seat. His words lingered in the atmosphere, a plea not just for justice, but for recognition of his humanity. She observed the jury, their expressions showing various emotions: doubt, compassion, and uncertainty. This was the moment. Truth was no longer limited to evidence or testimony. It had become a battle of conscience, a fight against the weight of bias and presumption. Eleanor understood that her role wasn't merely to enforce the law, but to interpret it in service of genuine justice. The trial's final day arrived heavy with expectation. Closing arguments were delivered with precision. The prosecutor relied on circumstantial evidence, urging the jury to trust the system's process. Lisa, however, appealed to the jury to look beyond the surface, to consider the gaps in the case and the humanity of the accused. Eleanor listened carefully, her expression neutral, but her mind active. Her role was clear. She could not influence the jury, but she would have the final authority if their verdict required interpretation. The responsibility of ensuring justice weighed heavily upon her. The jury deliberated for hours. The courtroom emptied and filled again as people moved about or whispered among themselves. James sat quietly, his hands tightly clasped before him. He hadn't looked toward Eleanor since the trial's opening day, and she understood why. What could she possibly say to improve any of this? Finally, the bailiff announced the jury had reached a decision. The room fell silent as the foreperson stood, a paper shaking in her grasp. "In the case of the state of Louisiana versus James Anderson, we find the defendant." The pause was excruciating. "Not guilty." The room burst into a mixture of gasps, murmurs, and even some applause. Eleanor struck her gavel, restoring quiet. James's shoulders dropped, as if a burden had been removed, though his face remained expressionless. He had gained his freedom, but clearly this victory had come at a price. Eleanor addressed the court, her voice steady. "The jury has rendered its verdict. Mr. Anderson, you are free to leave. Court is dismissed." As the courtroom cleared, Eleanor stayed behind, observing James as he completed his release documentation. For a moment, she thought he might depart without speaking, but then he turned and approached her. The room was nearly vacant now, with only a few clerks cleaning up and Margaret collecting files. James stopped several feet from the bench, his expression guarded. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly, "but I'd like to understand why you didn't say anything. You knew me." Eleanor felt her throat tighten, the words catching. "Because I couldn't. I had to remain impartial. If I had spoken up, it might have compromised the case." James studied her, his face showing both pain and understanding. "Impartial," he repeated. "That's the issue, Eleanor. The world has never been impartial. Not for people like me." She nodded slowly, her gaze falling to the polished wood of the bench. "You're correct. I wish I had done more then. I wish I could have done more now." James sighed, the tension in his bearing easing somewhat. "We were children. We didn't understand better. But you understand now, don't you?" "I do," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "And I'm sorry." James gave a slight nod, then turned and walked away, his back straight as he disappeared through the courthouse entrance. Eleanor sat alone in the empty courtroom, the weight of his words pressing upon her. She had upheld the law, but the trial had revealed a deeper truth. Justice wasn't simply about verdicts and evidence. It was about the lives shaped by systems far greater than any individual. For Eleanor, it was an awakening, a reminder that her position wasn't just a seat of authority, but a platform for transformation. As she departed the courtroom that evening, the setting sun casting extended shadows across the courthouse steps, Eleanor made a silent promise. She couldn't alter the past, but she would do everything within her power to ensure the future held more than empty promises of fairness. It would be challenging, perhaps even impossible, but she owed it to James and to herself to make the attempt.